DM is in vanish mode. Talking about you fine.
How did you even see that? Did you go?
I saw I did. I can go to his page and see when he was in Atlanta and when he was hitting you.
You can never break me. Ever. I'm trying to get some money.
You.
No, you.
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 I'm done with you. You're dead to me. Divorce.
Get the papers. I'm gonna take the high road like I should have done a long time ago.
Kendra had assumed that this evening would be just another evening spent in the comfort of her home, cooking dinner, and getting used to the routines of married life. But she had no idea that everything was about to fall apart. The air in Atlanta was hot that night, and the city's pulse was humming steadily beneath the still surface. Like any relationship, Kendra and Jocks had their share of ups and downs. Storms. But something had recently changed that neither of them could identify. But they could both sense it in the air. The intimacy between them had diminished, and it was replaced by an unspoken distance that seemed to widen every day. Kendra had hoped that they would survive the silent storm, that their love would triumph over whatever was threatening to separate them, but she was unaware that the Jock was no longer seeing things through the same lens. It began innocently enough when Kendra left her phone on the counter while she went into the kitchen to make dinner. The Jock, who had always had complete faith in her, found himself looking down at it. This wasn't something he would typically do, prying into her private life, but something had changed. Unsettling thoughts that had been bothering him lately, together with a nagging suspicion that Kendra was renouncing the straightforward. Even though he secretly understood that looking at her phone would be a betrayal of the trust they had built over the years, it seemed like the simplest method to validate those concerns. He didn't even need to ask for the passcode. Kendra made the mistake of locking her phone, which would ultimately be her downfall. When he unlocked it, Jock's hands shook a little. His eyes scanned the screen, and what he saw chilled him to his core. The messages weren't lighthearted. The more Jock read, the more his heart sank. These were not just the conversations one has with a friend or coworker. They were full of longing, hidden confessions, and a connection that felt too deep for comfort. They were the kind of words you don't share with anyone when you're in a committed relationship. Kendra had been keeping something from him that it felt as though everything they had worked so hard to create together had been betrayed. The person on the other end of the text was an ex from Kendra's past, someone she had once shared a part of her life with. He wasn't just a mere friend. Rather, this man held a place in Kendra's heart, and those unsafe feelings had not only remained. Jock's hands trembled as he read the conversation again, his chest tightening with a mixture of fury and disbelief. But had returned in their communications, it was evident that more had transpired than Kendra had disclosed. This wasn't a one-time error, but rather a continuing emotional issue. Jock's rage was swift and unrestrained. He felt as though everything had been upended, including the love he had put into his marriage and the promises they had made to each other. He could feel the heat rising in his chest and his thoughts spiraling as his vision blurred with rage, and he couldn't ignore the gnawing sensation in his stomach that he had been deceived. Kendra noticed the tension in the air as soon as she returned to the living room, where the Jock was standing with his phone in hand, his face pale with shock and anger. It didn't take her long to realize what was happening. She knew he had seen the messages because of the icy, accusing expression in his eyes.
Talking about you fine.
How did you even see that? Did you go?
I saw I did. I
The hush was broken before she could even open her mouth to speak by Jock's voice. His words were low and threatening, a silent fury that sent shivers down Kendra's spine. Kendra's attempt to conceal this aspect of her life, in order to preserve the tenuous bond she shared with Jock, was unsuccessful. Instead, everything was exposed, including their conversations, flirtations, and secret connection. I can explain this by saying that Kendra's voice was shaking as she whispered, but there was already damage. Jock didn't want an explanation. He wanted the truth, and the truth was suffocating. "You think you can just hide this from me?" he yelled, his voice rising in a mixture of anger and hurt. "This is my back." As if it were an indictment in and of itself, he pointed to the phone in his palm. The pain in his eyes was more intense than Kendra had expected. She had never intended to harm him and had never imagined that her actions would have such a terrible effect, but now I didn't mean for this to happen, and there was no way to reverse it. Kendra tried, but her words felt weak and helpless against the emotional storm that the Jock was unleashing. "No," Jock said resentfully, his fists clenched. "You didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And now everything we had is a lie." Kendra felt as if she had been smacked across the face by the words, and the weight of his allegation was pressing down on her chest, choking her. She wanted to apologize and explain to put things right, but she believed that she had damaged his trust, which was nearly impossible to mend, and that no amount of words could ever make up for the disaster she had made. "You think this is a joke? I trusted you and I loved you, but you've ruined all we had, Kendra. You've broken me." His jaw kept moving, but now his rage had taken over. His eyes, which had once been warm and loving, were now filled with contempt and treachery as Kendra reached for him, but he jerked away, his body rigid with pain. Kendra stood alone in the center of the room, the weight of her decisions weighing heavily on her as the door slammed behind him. "Maybe this marriage was never real," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I was just a fool." Kendra fell onto the couch with tears in her eyes. She had lost him. There was no going back. The lies and secrets had ruined everything. The Jock had left into the night, the hurt and betrayal writhing in her heart. He couldn't go back to his gut. Not after this. The foundation they had established, the love they had shared, the trust had been destroyed, and the truth had come to light, leaving scars too deep to mend. The night spanned the empty silence in the house, the emptiness within their respective hearts,